In a time of kings, power, and destiny, a story was unfolding, hidden within a mighty empire. A story that would change everything. Of courage, of purpose. The story of Esther. In a great empire long ago, there lived a young woman, chosen for something greater than she ever imagined. Her name was Esther. From a simple life to the palace of a king, her journey would take her further than she ever dreamed. But danger was rising, quietly, in the shadows. A proud and powerful man began to plot evil, a plan that would bring destruction to an entire people. And now, Esther faced a choice: to remain silent and stay safe, or to speak up and risk everything. With courage, wisdom, and perfect timing, one decision would save a nation. Because sometimes, even when you cannot see it, purpose is already at work. What would you do if staying silent could cost thousands of lives, but speaking up could cost your own? Welcome to Connect Heaven, where Bible stories come alive with truth, faith, and inspiration for your everyday life. This animated story is inspired by the Holy Bible and is presented for spiritual growth, education, and inspiration. While creative elements and visuals have been added for storytelling purposes, viewers are encouraged to read the original scripture from the Book of Esther for full context and understanding. King Xerxes ruled a vast empire filled with wealth and power. One day, he hosted a grand feast to display his greatness. Music filled the air. Gold sparkled everywhere. The palace was alive with celebration. But during the feast, the king made a command that would change everything. "Bring Queen Vashti before me," he ordered. But the queen refused.
What is this I see?
Sire, a misunderstanding! You dare defy me! This insult will not stand!
The king was furious. And just like that, the throne beside him became empty. In another part of the city lived a young Jewish girl named Esther, a quiet light in a busy world, known not for riches or status, but for the beauty of her heart. She walked the simple streets of Susa with gentle grace, her eyes filled with kindness, her words soft and thoughtful. Wherever she went, peace seemed to follow. The elderly found comfort in her presence. Children were drawn to her warmth, and neighbors spoke of her with quiet admiration. Esther was not raised in a palace, but in a humble home shaped by love, discipline, and faith. Under Mordecai's care, she learned the value of compassion, humility, and courage. Every lesson he shared, she carried in her heart, not as rules, but as a way of life. There was something different about Esther, something the world could not yet see. A quiet strength, a hidden purpose, a destiny unfolding in silence. Even in the ordinary moments, helping a neighbor, sharing a smile, walking beside her guardian, her life was being prepared for something far greater than she could imagine. The king searched the vast empire for a new queen. From distant lands and noble families, from quiet villages and great cities, young women were gathered and brought into the royal palace of Susa. Each one arrived with hope in her heart. Some dreamed of power, others of honor, and many wondered what their future would hold within the palace walls. Day by day, the courtyard filled with beauty and color, rich fabrics, sparkling jewels, and voices from many nations blending together in a place filled with anticipation. But among them stood Esther, quiet, composed, and different. She did not try to outshine the others. She did not seek attention or compete for favor. Where others spoke loudly, she listened. Where others pushed forward, she stepped back. There was a gentle strength about her, a calmness that could not be taught, and a grace that could not be imitated. Inside the palace, the preparation began. For months, the women were treated with oils, perfumes, and careful attention. Every detail mattered, every movement observed, every moment leading to a single meeting with the king. The halls echoed with laughter, whispers, and hidden rivalry, each woman hoping she would be chosen. But Esther remained the same. She treated everyone with kindness. She spoke with humility. She carried herself with quiet dignity, even when no one seemed to notice. And yet, she was noticed. Not for her appearance alone, though she was beautiful, but for something deeper, something rare. As the days passed, favor began to follow her, from the attendants who cared for her to those who watched her from a distance. Then came the moment. One by one, the women were called to stand before the king, each given a chance to win his heart. And when it was Esther's turn, she walked forward, not with pride, but with peace. No striving, no fear, just quiet confidence. And when the king saw her, he paused. In a palace filled with beauty, in a kingdom filled with choices, Esther stood apart. There was something in her spirit, something pure, something steady, something unforgettable. And in that moment, the king's heart began to turn toward her. The palace stood still, wrapped in a moment that would change history forever. From every corner of the kingdom, people had gathered, watching, waiting, wondering who would be chosen. Then she appeared. Esther stepped forward, graceful and composed. No longer just a young woman from a humble home. There was something different now, a quiet strength, a divine favor. King Xerxes watched her closely. Among all, his gaze had found her, not because she demanded attention, but because she carried something deeper. Beauty in humility, courage in gentleness. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on the throne. Slowly, the king rose, holding the royal crown, golden, radiant, a symbol of destiny. And as he placed it upon her head, everything changed. The orphan became queen. The unknown became unforgettable. The hall erupted in celebration. But beyond the noise, Mordecai stood watching, proud, grateful, knowing this was more than a crown. This was purpose. This was destiny. And Esther's story was only just beginning. As evening settled over the royal palace, the golden light of the setting sun bathed the gates in quiet peace. Mordecai sat where he often did, just outside the king's gate, watching, waiting, living his simple life with quiet faith. But on this evening, something felt different. Not far from him, 2 palace guards stepped aside from the others. Their voices dropped to whispers. Their eyes moved carefully, making sure no one was listening. But someone was. Mordecai. At first he said nothing. He simply listened. His calm expression slowly faded, replaced by concern. The words he heard were not ordinary. They were dangerous. A secret plan. A dark intention. A plot against the king. Mordecai's heart began to race. This was no small matter. The life of the king was in danger. And in that moment, he had a choice. Stay silent or speak up. Without hesitation, Mordecai rose to his feet. There was no time to waste. He moved quickly, carrying the weight of what he had heard. The message had to reach the king. Within the palace walls, the message was delivered. King Xerxes listened carefully. His expression changed, from calm to shock. The truth was clear. The danger was real. At once, orders were given. The guards were seized, their secret exposed, their plan stopped before it could begin. Justice moved swiftly, and the king's life was spared. Outside the palace, Mordecai returned to his place at the gate. Quiet, unnoticed. No reward, no recognition. Just a man who chose to do what was right. But what he did that night would not be forgotten forever. Haman had risen to great power in the kingdom, second only to the king himself. With every step he took through the streets, he expected honor, admiration, and complete obedience. And the people gave it. As soon as they saw him, they bowed low to the ground, some out of respect, others out of fear. To them, Haman was a man not to be offended. But among the crowd stood one man who would not bow. Mordecai. He did not shout. He did not resist with anger. He simply stood, calm and unmoved, not out of pride, but out of faith. For Mordecai would not bow to any man in a way that belonged to God alone. Day after day, this moment repeated itself. Haman passing by, the people bowing, and Mordecai standing firm. And each time, it stirred something dark inside Haman. What began as a small offense quickly grew into burning anger. His pride could not accept it. His heart could not ignore it. One man's quiet stand was about to awaken a dangerous plan that would shake the entire kingdom. Chapter 40. Mordecai's Still Day. Haman's hatred had finally found its moment. What had been quietly growing in his heart now rose to the surface, bold and unrestrained. With carefully chosen words and a voice that concealed his true intentions, he stood before the throne and spoke. His tone was calm, but beneath it was something far darker: envy, pride, and a desire for control. He painted a picture that stirred the king's concern, twisting truth just enough to make it dangerous. And the king, seated in power, yet unaware of the depth of Haman's scheme, listened. Slowly, almost casually, he placed his trust in Haman's hands. With the removal of a ring, authority was transferred, and in that quiet moment, something irreversible began. A decree was written, every word deliberate, every line heavy with consequence. Ink pressed into parchment, sealing a fate that many had no idea was coming. Then came the final act. The king's seal, stamped into wax, marking it with unquestionable authority. What was decided in a private chamber would not remain hidden for long. Messengers were sent out in every direction, riding with urgency across cities, deserts, and distant provinces. The decree moved swiftly, carried by hooves and voices, reaching places untouched by the palace's walls. And as it spread, so did the weight of its message. What began as pride, as wounded ego and quiet resentment, was no longer small. It had grown into something far greater, something that would soon cast a shadow over an entire people.
Let the royal decree be read. By royal command, all grain is seized, taxes double, defiance is treason.
God's child.
Obey or face the king's wrath.
When the decree was read, sorrow spread like fire. It moved quickly from one voice to another, from one street to the next, until the entire city seemed to feel its weight at once. What began as a single announcement soon became a wave of fear, confusion, and grief that no one could ignore. What was written in the palace became pain in the streets. Words formed in silence behind royal walls now echoed loudly among the people. Families gathered in shock. Friends looked at one another in disbelief, and hearts that once felt secure were suddenly shaken. The distance between the throne and the streets vanished, replaced by a harsh reality that touched every home. Mordecai could not remain silent. The moment he understood what had been declared, something within him broke open. This was no quiet sorrow he could carry alone. His grief demanded expression. His grief was loud. His mourning was deep. He tore his garments, clothed himself in sackcloth, and covered his head with ashes. His cries rose above the noise of the city, raw, unfiltered, filled with anguish. It was the kind of sorrow that could not be hidden, the kind that demanded to be seen and heard. And he was not alone. All across the land, others joined in mourning. Fasting, weeping, and lamentation spread among the people as the weight of the decree settled in their hearts. Fear gripped them, but so did a shared sorrow that bound them together. A cry rose from the people, not just a sound, but a collective outpouring of pain, rising from broken hearts and desperate souls. A cry that would soon reach the palace itself. The palace gates stood as a barrier between two worlds, one filled with power and comfort, the other trembling under the shadow of a deadly decree. Mordecai remained outside. He could not enter. He did not belong within those royal walls anymore. Not dressed in sorrow, not carrying a message like this. So he waited. And when the moment was right, he called for a trusted servant, one of the king's attendants assigned to Queen Esther herself. The servant approached carefully, aware that this was no ordinary conversation. Mordecai stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. Every word he spoke carried weight. He did not rush, but neither did he soften the truth. He told him everything: the decree, the danger, the destruction that had been planned. Then, with steady hands, he placed the message into the servant's care. Not just words, but a burden. "Take this to Esther," his eyes seemed to say. "She must know." Mordecai's message should feel weighty, almost like every word carries the fate of a people. Let it build slowly, with pauses that allow the emotion to settle. Mordecai's words came not with anger, but with a deep, steady urgency.
Do not think, Esther, that because you are in the king's palace, you will escape what is coming. You may be surrounded by gold, by comfort, by protection, but this decree reaches farther than walls. It reaches hearts. It reaches lives. It reaches our people. If you remain silent at this time, silence will not stop what has been set in motion. Help will come, yes. Deliverance will rise from another place. God's purpose will not fail. But you and your father's house will be swept away in the silence. And then a question hangs in the air, one that only you can answer. Who knows, Esther? Who knows if you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Not by accident, not by chance, not by the will of men alone, but for this moment where fear stands before you and purpose calls your name, this moment where one decision could change everything.
Let the final line breathe, with Esther absorbing the weight of it. This is the turning point where fear and destiny meet. Faced with a danger greater than fear, Esther chose faith. The weight of the moment rested heavily upon her heart. A decree had gone out, one that threatened the lives of her people. And now, the responsibility to act rested on her shoulders alone. But Esther did not rush forward in her own strength. Instead, she stepped away from the noise of the palace, away from the comfort of royal privilege, and into a place of surrender. For 3 days she fasted. No food, no water, only prayer. In the quiet of the night, as the world around her slept, Esther knelt by the window, the soft glow of the moon lighting her face. Her crown was set aside, her royal garments replaced with humility. This was no longer about a throne. This was about purpose. Her hands trembled as she prayed, her voice soft yet filled with urgency. Every word carried the weight of a people crying out for deliverance. She knew the risk. To approach the king without being summoned could mean death. Yet even in that fear, faith began to rise. Because Esther understood something deeper, that victory is not won in the palace halls, but in the secret place of prayer. As the hours passed, her weakness became strength. Her fears turned into courage. Her tears became trust. And in that sacred moment, heaven was listening. God was moving, even when she could not yet see it. By the time Esther would rise from her knees, she would not just be a queen. She would be a vessel prepared for destiny. And what lay ahead would change everything.
Hear my prayer, O Lord. In my distress, I seek your face. Thank you for hearing me.
The king and Haman joined Queen Esther for a royal banquet. The palace was alive with light and splendor. Laughter echoed gently through the hall. Servants moved quietly, pouring wine into golden cups, ensuring that every detail was perfect. To anyone watching, it was a moment of celebration, a night of honor, favor, and royal delight. King Xerxes sat comfortably beside Esther, pleased and relaxed, enjoying the company of his queen. His eyes rested on her with admiration, unaware of the weight she carried within. And nearby sat Haman, honored, respected, elevated above all others. A man who believed this moment was a sign of his greatness, that he alone had been chosen to dine with the king and queen. Pride filled his heart as he reclined at the table, confident in his position, unaware that the very seat he occupied would soon become a place of reckoning. But across from him sat Esther, graceful, composed, silent. Her beauty shone outwardly, but within her, a quiet battle was being fought. This was not just a banquet. This was not just a royal invitation. This was her moment. The moment she had prayed for. The moment she had fasted for. The moment that could cost her everything, or save her people. The music, the laughter, the clinking of cups, all faded behind the steady beating of her heart. Would she speak? Would she risk it all before the king? The atmosphere remained calm, but something deeper was shifting. Because hidden beneath the beauty, beneath the laughter, beneath the flowing wine, was a moment that would change everything. With courage born from faith, Esther stepped into danger. Not summoned, not announced, but driven by a purpose greater than her fear. Each step echoed through the throne room like a question. Would this be her last? The law was clear. No one approached the king uninvited and lived. And yet, she walked forward, carrying the weight of a nation on her shoulders. Her heart pounded, her breath trembled, but her spirit held firm. Because this was more than a moment. It was destiny calling. All eyes watched in silence. The guards stood ready. The court held its breath. One moment could decide her life and the fate of her people. Then the king looked upon her. A pause, heavy and unspoken. A silence that stretched like eternity. And in that silence, everything hung in the balance. But where fear expected judgment, grace stepped in. The golden scepter lifted. Mercy was extended. And just like that, hope began to rise. In the quiet of the night, when the palace should have been at rest, the king found no peace. Sleep refused to come. What seemed like a simple, restless night was no accident. In that silence, a decision was made that would shift everything. To pass the time, the king ordered the royal records to be read aloud. As the scrolls were opened and the past revisited, a forgotten moment surfaced. It was the account of Mordecai, the man who had once uncovered a plot to assassinate the king and saved his life. The king paused. "Was anything done to honor him?" he asked. The answer came back quietly. Nothing had been done. In that moment, what had been overlooked was brought into the light. A forgotten act of loyalty was about to receive its reward. And what seemed like a sleepless night was actually the beginning of a divine reversal.
Haman, lead Mordecai through the city!
Pride had led Haman to the height of power. But in a single moment, everything turned.
Hail the king's favorite!
The honor
This
he
is
had
not
desired
right.
for himself
I should not be here.
was given
Lead on,
to the
Haman.
very
The
man
king's will be
he
done.
despised.
Let all see the honor bestowed
Before
upon
the watching
Mordecai.
city, Haman walked in shame, forced to lift up Mordecai, the one he had planned to destroy. Each step was heavy, each word a burden. The crowd watched in awe as justice unfolded before their eyes. Mordecai stood tall, calm, unshaken, vindicated, not by his own strength,
Claimed
but by
Mordecai is to be
divine
honored.
favor.
This
And
cannot
Haman,
be. It should be
once
me.
exalted,
Peace, Haman.
now
God's will
tasted the
prevails.
weight of humiliation. For in the end, pride falls, and honor is given by the hand of God. The banquet hall was filled with beauty, laughter, and royal splendor. But beneath it, a truth waited to be revealed. Queen Esther stood before the king, graceful yet unshaken. This was the moment she had prepared for, the moment that would change everything. With courage rising from deep within, she lifted her voice, not as a queen alone, but as a woman pleading for her people. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be given to me, and the lives of my people." The room fell silent. The king leaned forward, confusion turning to concern. "Who is he?" he demanded. "Who would dare do such a thing?" And then Esther spoke the truth. The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Time seemed to stop. All eyes turned. Haman's confidence shattered in an instant.
Haman, your plot
The man
against
who
my
once
people
stood in
is
pride
revealed.
now trembled in fear.
You will answer for
The
your
king's
treachery.
face burned with anger.
Mercy, my queen,
Betrayal
I
had
beg you.
entered his court,
Justice
and it stood
will be
before
done.
him. In a single moment, everything changed. The hidden was revealed. The proud were brought low, and courage spoke louder than fear. And in that silence, justice had begun. Haman's pride had reached its end. The man who once stood high above others now stumbled in disgrace. Fear filled his eyes as everything he had built with arrogance collapsed in a single moment. Before the king, justice was no longer delayed. The trap Haman had set for another had become his own. Esther stood in quiet strength. Mordecai watched in solemn relief. And in that moment, the balance was restored. What was meant for harm was turned for good. Joy replaced sorrow. Fear turned into celebration. Across the empire, the people rejoiced, for deliverance had come. What was meant for destruction became a story of victory. In life, moments come when one choice can change everything. A step of courage, a decision to stand firm, can shape the course of history. Esther stood when it mattered most. Mordecai remained faithful when no one was watching. And through it all, God was working, even when unseen. This story reminds us that truth is always worth standing for, that faith is stronger than fear, and that you, too, may be right where you are for a reason. For at the right time, in the right place, God's purpose will always prevail. Dear God, thank you for the story of Esther and the courage you placed within her heart. Help us to be brave when doing what is right, even when it is not easy. Give us strength to stand for others and compassion to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Remind us that you are always working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see it. Bless everyone watching this today. Fill their homes with peace, strengthen their faith, and renew their hope. May your presence go with them in every step they take. In Jesus' name, amen. As this story comes to an end, remember the power of faith, courage, and trust in God. If this story has blessed you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Connect Heaven. Stay connected for more Bible animation stories that inspire faith, build hope, and bring the Word of God to life in a powerful way. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next story.